Hello and welcome to Bags of Action. My name is Pete and this is a 5-minute Bags of Action review of Roadhouse, the remake from 2024. Ex-UFC fighter Dalton takes a job as a bouncer to Florida Keys Roadhouse, only to discover that this paradise is not all it seems. Now, before I get into this 2024 take on the 1989 classic, I need to share a little bit of my bias towards the original movie. In my opinion, Patrick Swayze, while not necessarily the best actor of his generation, was the best movie star of his generation. His charm and screen presence are at levels even George Clooney only dreams of. Now, two of my favourite films featuring him are Point Break and this film, Roadhouse. And I made a point of never seeing the Point Break remake. I mean, the original was a Catherine Bigelow movie, so I think it was a real insult to make that again. But something about Roadhouse being remade did pique my interest. The central concept felt like it could be reimagined, and the people involved with it are really high calibre, and the trailer for it was pretty good. So it changed my mind. I didn't plan to watch this film, but I did. I've gone in to watch this Prime Video film, which I guess came about from Amazon's purchase of MGM. They've got the old back catalogue, and then it makes sense for them to do a remake of the original film. So one of the other big draws for me was the lead actor here. Jake Gyllenhaal, he takes on the role of Dalton, and this time a UFC fighter doing his first bouncer role, rather than Swayze's seasoned cooler. Southpaw showed me that Gyllenhaal has the physical prowess to back up his acting chops, so I thought, seeing him in another fight movie, yep, I'm all in for that. Now the director here has a much larger, more established pedigree than Rowdy Herrington, who made the original. Doug Liman directs this movie. He's made things like Edge of Tomorrow, Bourne Identity, Jumper, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So again, you can see why I had some interest in this movie. And then you've got the writers. You've got Anthony Bagazzuri, who co-wrote The Nice Guys with Shane Black, and also Chuck Mondry, who has a Doc Savage script in development. And not only that, this film was produced by the legendary action movie producer Joel Silver. So again, you can see why my head was turned. A film I never planned to see, and suddenly I thought, do you know what? I'm going to give it a go. And the more press I read about it, Doug Liman was really pushing how this should have been a cinema release. I think he showed it to Jeff Bezos on his yacht to try and convince him to give this a cinema run. But instead, it went on to Prime, where it is currently the worldwide #1. Now, who else is in this movie alongside Gyllenhaal? Well, you've got Daniela Melchior. She's been in Fast X, The Suicide Squad, and Guardians of the Galaxy 3. You've got UFC legend Conor McGregor making his acting debut. More on that to follow. Billy Magnussen from Game Night and No Time to Die even. And also Post Malone under his acting name Austin Post, who's also been in Wrath of Man. So, the film started off in quite an interesting way. The setup was different enough from the original, but at the same time reassuringly familiar. The fight scenes were interestingly handled. Gyllenhaal had obviously put in a lot of work to get into shape and to learn MMA skills. There's some clever camera work, some interesting POV shots, and some CG trickery that makes the fights really visceral and elevates them in ways that you don't expect. So far, so good. Gyllenhaal is really good. As you'd expect, he's a top-draw A-list actor, pouring in his heart and soul into this reimagining of the role. There are some nods to the original film. When he meets his female Dr. Love interest, you get the "no one ever wins a fight" dialogue from the original. And here, in the Roadhouse, rather than Jeff Healey's band behind the cage singing, it's a variety of different bands on each night, which was also interesting. Again, a nod to the past, but while doing something new. So within the first 15 minutes, I was starting to really warm to this movie. Do you know what? They could catch lightning in a bottle twice. This could be worth a watch. But as the film went on, I started to like it less and less with every passing scene, until I didn't really know what the hell I was watching. The plot to this movie overall makes little to no sense. Dalton's backstory is odd. He's a famous UFC fighter, but most people don't know him, while at the same time his reputation precedes him and some people do know who he is. His first fight in the bar is with characters who are key to the overall villain narrative, so we never get time to just see him doing his job and then watch things escalate. Maybe they thought the modern audience hasn't got the patience for that. Instead, every fight in the bar is in some way linked to the overall story. Also, how does a UFC fighter become qualified to be a bouncer overnight and then teach that skills to others? And then as the film goes on, he shows a variety of other skills which suggest a background far different from the one that they've set up. So it wasn't great. And then two characters totally derailed what started off as a half-decent action movie. First is Magnuson as the main villain, Ben Brandt. This spoilt rich kid son of a convict is played so over the top it makes Jake Busey in Roadhouse 2 seem restrained. There's an absolutely absurd scene to introduce him, with him getting a shave on a boat that irritated the hell out of me, and that's even before the crocodile turned up in this film. Now, if I thought his character was annoying, and from a totally different film tonally, well, I hadn't seen anything yet. When Conor McGregor turned up, the film became something that made Crank seem like high art. He can fight, of course he can, that was never in any doubt, but the man cannot act, and he can barely move like a regular human being. His character makes no sense at all. He just swaggers around being irritating in a way that only a 15-year-old boy would find endearing. He has to win the Razzie this year for Worst Supporting Actor. The second half of this movie loses the plot, literally and figuratively. It feels like the whole film is on cocaine. When Gyllenhaal breezes through it like Laurence Olivier guesting in Hollyoaks. Wham bam dumb action movies are all good and well, but there is no coherent story here, no character depth, no motivation, just an excuse to have one dumb scene after another. Post Malone and McGregor are horrible bits of stunt casting, and the film feels like watching a series of Instagram reels or TikTok videos edited into a 2-hour sequence. If this is what modern audiences want, then maybe it's time I stepped away from the action movies I love. Now, lots of things are set up here and never carried through, like a series of computer game cut scenes. This for me is the ultimate in style over substance. The backstory is poor. The relationships are undercooked. I do not believe the central love story for 1 second. The performances by key players are massively over the top. And the biggest issue for me is the lack of heart. Something the original had in spades. Now, without his own Wade Garrett character, played in the original, of course, by Sam Elliott, Dalton just seems like an empty shell. The tagline here is "Take it outside," but other than the first fight, they never do. It's just empty. It's a film devoid of any real emotion. Even the things that are meant to make you feel something, they just don't. It feels hollow in so many ways. I'm so disappointed. In a world where AI is making moves to start writing and making films, something like this doesn't help the cause. This feels like someone fed the old movie in as a prompt, along with a bag of cocaine, some stunt casting, and then made the movie. And if this is what audiences want now, maybe that's the way it'll go. Maybe AI will make all films in the future. There is some real talent involved here, and that's what drew me in, but they've made something so painfully disjointed, so utterly shallow, that I think they should be ashamed. Modern action movies have moved towards spectacle over emotional centres, and this film had the chance to address that balance, but instead it fed into the hype machine, the remake franchise circus that is killing cinema. And I think this film may actually be the final nail in the coffin. Doug Liman, Joel Silver, Jake Gyllenhaal, massive mess. I can't quite get my head around how far into the world of wrongness the second half of this film went. I almost can't believe I've watched it. Can't believe that it exists. But hey, what do I know? There are people out there that seem to be loving this movie. I've read people saying that it's better than the original in various ways. That's not for me, and maybe I'm an old man with a nostalgic take on things. You know, I grew up on Lethal Weapon, Die Hard and Predator, and even the second tier of movies like Roadhouse, like Blind Fury, like Stone Cold, but all of those films had a central character you cared about, emotions, revenge, on-screen deaths that made you wish you were the person there to kind of get your own back, not to laugh at. I don't know. I'm done. This film, let's give some scores then. I'm going to give Roadhouse, the remake, not the original, 1 bag of action out of 5. I could have given it 0, but the fight scenes alone and Gyllenhaal's performance elevate it to 1 bag. Have you seen the remake of Roadhouse? Do you agree with my assessment of it? I've been pretty damning, so maybe you don't. But I can't find any redeeming aspects to the second half of the film. And Conor McGregor in particular just blew my mind how bad he was. So, yeah, let me know. Maybe I've got it completely wrong. Maybe I'm just a cranky old man Feel free to comment below or get in touch with us via email, Facebook, or on Twitter. We have new episodes coming out occasionally, including full-length ones. Don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell for notifications. Bags of Action will always be free, but if you'd like to buy us a coffee, you can do that at our Ko-fi page.